Hello and welcome to another dive into the icky part of technology, scams, and phishing. This time we're looking at the advanced fee scam. It's also known as a 419 scam. It's a very common scam. You see them pretty much all the time. Usually mail filters will actually prevent this from getting to you because they are so common. An advanced fee scam is where someone claims you have won the lottery, or a Nigerian prince has willed his money to you, or you've come upon somehow you come upon a massive amount of money, usually in the millions of dollars, and the only way of getting this money somehow is to pay money. A little odd, isn't it? So rather than just saying you've won $2 million, we'll take $1,000 out of that money to pay you, say no, there's legal reasons why you have to pay this to get this money. The $2 million never exists. If you didn't sign up for the lottery or pay for the lottery ticket, or you don't know you have a Nigerian prince in your family line, or a number of things of like this, you didn't get it. It just things just don't come out like that. Or at least I've never seen it happen. So what they'll do is they'll say you've won this money, and you need to send us $1,000, $2,000, something like that, to get the money. For whatever reason, they won't take a check. They won't take a wire transfer because those are traceable. They are always going to want you to send them money through, surprisingly enough, gift cards. Because you know banks always work with gift cards. Yeah. In this case, I have multiple honeypot accounts out there, sorry, and it came to one of my honeypots, and so I dived into it. The advanced fee scam is really not like a glamorous thing to watch. It's a very basic, very low-tech scam. It's been around not just with technology, it's been around for probably thousands of years. I imagine that this is probably some form of this for selling the Brooklyn Bridge, if you're familiar with history on that one. So in this case, we'll switch over. I've got Jeff Green here claims, or he says, I'm a billionaire. I'm going to switch over here. He actually is a real person. Jeff Green's a real billionaire. He lives out there somewhere doing billionaire stuff. I don't know what he does. He's some sort. Looks like he does something with marketing and businessy business stuff. So somehow I've won, or not won. He's just going to give me $2 million. I guess as philanthropy. So of course I go, sure, I want that money. It says you need to send an email to my private banker, Jeff, or to where'd it go? To John Gilmore at Barclays Private Banking Services. Again, this guy also is a real person. So they've kind of gone above and beyond on the scamminess, and they're spoofing not only this billionaire who doesn't give a crap, but John Gilmore, who is just doing his job. You can see where they're saying, I'm John Gilmore, Barclays Private Bank. To get this, you need to fill out this form and send it back to us. So I send it back, and we just kind of go through the process of going back and forth where he says, you want the money, you need to fill this out, and he gives us information. And she said, okay, we need you to, here is your wire transfer confirmation. This is where the actual hook comes in. So they don't just say, you want $2 million, we need $1,000 from you. They want to slowly pull you in, like most confidence scams. They're not just going to go like, you want money? Give us money. That's more like kind of like gambling, I guess, or some other thing. They're wanting to get you emotionally invested in this thing. You go further and further. In this case, we have the fake Jeff Green saying, "You've got this. I need to hand you off to my banker to do this," and that kind of draws you in. Like it can't be fake if there's two people involved. It's probably the same person on two different accounts. I mean, because that can happen. And they slowly get more and more information out of you, which is useful in its own right. Like I'll show you the form in a second, but here's what it actually looks like. So the information on here is all fake. I use what's called a legend. I have multiple fake, I'd say personalities. That makes it sound creepy. So I have multiple fake characters I have created using a combination of real and fake information. So real banks, real locations, but not real people or real credit card numbers or anything like that. It's enough to pass first glance, but not enough to actually do anything with. And I said, this form actually does, if it were not real information, would give them a fair amount of information that they could do some nastiness with. So like the person's name, their account number for their bank, their bank's account, their bank, what bank they are with, SWIFT codes. That's a international wire transfer. Um, Various little bits of information there that could be useful to them. Is not as useful as straight up cash, but it's enough for them to go, hey, this is we could resell this or leverage this into some other scam or some other nastiness later on. So they've kind of drawn me in over several emails here, and this is where they finally come in and say, we've got you on the hook. You want this money. And that's where it's like, okay, you need $1,000 for some reason in I think I call it reloaded cards. I actually haven't heard of this before. That's a new one on me, but you can apparently get them like at the bank or not the bank, at the gas station. So they keep drawing in. So okay, if you want it, you have to go to one of these locations, get this reloaded card that looks like this, and take pictures of it or send us the numbers. Of course, because that's where I'm coming back. I'm actually pushing back on them and saying the gas station wouldn't sell it to me. I actually didn't go to the gas station. Well, I need to get gas, but whatever. But most places now actually will not sell these things over a certain amount without asking you questions. So I do applaud the grocery stores, well, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Publixes, the whatever store you have in your area, the Best Buys, the gas stations. They're becoming very wise to this sort of thing, and now they usually have a sign there, either a handwritten or a well-made large sign by the corporation itself that says banks will not take gift cards. IRS, police, FBI, what have you, they don't accept gift cards. That's what you'll see. These things will also be where there's another form of this sort of scan where you say you've been caught downloading porn or sending your genitals to people that you shouldn't or something of those natures. Where the police, you give us $500, will go away. Yeah, that on its face, you go, yeah, no, because if you're doing something like that, the police kick your door in. They don't say it's a fine of $500 from Steam gift cards. No, they're kicking your door in and taking you to jail. Yeah, you can't pay off those sort of things unless it's white collar crime. That's all, different deal. But I definitely guarantee you the bank will not accept a gift card. They'll accept check. They'll accept cash. They'll accept accept your ATM card. They'll not take gift card. Hopefully, I imagine somewhere there's some bank going, yeah, we take it. Like one bank in the country takes it just to make me wrong. Hopefully not. This time he actually sends me a fake ID. We'll take a look at all this and all these assets in a moment here because I don't want to jump back and forth squeezing screens too much. He says, I tell them they won't sell them to me. And he's like, banks don't scam people. Well, that's because you're not a bank. If you'll understand something is you automatically call it a scam. Well, it is a scam. So here's my attached identification so you know who you're dealing with. Sure, why not? And it goes back and forth for a while where I tell him, like, why can't I send you a check or a wire transfer? And they say, that's not possible. And the idea of this is he wants to, he's running out of patience with me because he's kind of like, this person is probably not going to come through because of whatever reason, like fear, or I'm getting wise to them, or in this case, I'm an IT. I work in IT field. I'm like, yeah, I already know this is a scam. I'm just trying to lead him through. But he's kind of losing patience with me because either he's like, yeah, this is not going to go through, or he can kind of double down on it ish to where he instills like that fear of losing out. It's like that FOMO, fear of missing out on this opportunity, this amazing money. Whereas flat says that's not possible. So he'd probably wait and see where I go with that. I'm bugging back and forth. And eventually I'm like, can I come to you? Unfortunately, it doesn't show it down here. I will. Can I do this? Can I come to you? How do I get this money to you? He's like, you can come to that's the actual location for Barclays Bank and pay it there. And I go back and say, okay, I'll be there in a week. How do I contact you? So obviously I'm not going to be there in a week. What I'm trying to do is gather more information from them, any sort of detail that I can leverage to dig into their organization or the structure, who's involved here, so I can turn around and point that to usually the police or the FBI, or I can shut down their services. Is what I'm going to do with this one at least is we're going to jump over a bit here. So we're going to actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we'll look at the actual files they sent me, so you can take a look at those, and then we'll look into the actual investigation. I'll bring this up. So these are the files they sent. So we'll go over one by one so you can see what these things look like. Some look pretty good, some really don't. And so this is what they initially sent me. This is this form I've got here, where they claim, well, this does not claim, this probably is Barclays' actual form that they send for this sort of thing. It looks good enough to be a legit one. It could be fake. I don't know the difference. I don't do business with Barclays. They're based out of London, England. That's above my pay grade. But it could be. But very likely, they just downloaded this thing off their website. It's available on Google somewhere. So once I filled that form out, they sent back this supposed wire transfer form. So they took the information. So all the stuff you're seeing here is the information I provided them as part of my legend. And so Nevada State Bank, that's where that bank supposedly is. The address for this guy, somewhere in here, I think. So the name Jonathan Hartman is the fake name I've got, the account number, all stuff. So they actually did a little bit of work here where they mocked up, excuse me, where they mocked up a wire transfer form. I don't know what a wire transfer form looks like. I've never seen one. This does not look half bad. I think it's intentionally made to look stuff going on. That's kind of the goal there, is to show so much stuff going on that you're not going to see what's not real. So if you look at it a little closer, you'll see the things like the Barclays logo up here. So the logo doesn't look right, does it? It looks fuzzy. It looks blurry. It looks poorly centered. It's got various things where you kind of go, yeah, it's probably not real. Or from a bank of this stature, of this size, their stuff's going to be on point. There's not going to be anything that looks weird here. You can see like the logo here looks so weird. The background watermark thing, is very blurry. The Barclays bank, where they've got it overlaid over and over again, kind of like another watermark like you'd see on checks. If you go take a look closer here, you see it doesn't look amazing. It doesn't look half bad. It doesn't look amazing. So they really are just trying to overlay enough information here that we wouldn't know one way or the other to make it look like it's real. So like this and all this stuff doesn't mean anything. The only part they want us looking at, the parts in red. So we got $2 million, $2 million, and the transfer's on hold until this is paid. So they're trying to, I'm trying to think, what's the word for that? So they're trying to instill the idea that this is legitimate and that this $2 million is associated with this payment. And so you have to pay this. And so that's what they sent me. Again, where they try to make it look legit, but the closer you zoom in on it, obviously, it looks worse. So you got your logo looks quite bad. A supposed watermark here looks quite bad. And some fake, like a fake stamp and some stuff like that. So let's bring it out to normal view here. So for some reason, this Barclays Bank, a legitimate massive bank based out of London, says I need to go to Office Depot or a Quick Stop. Yeah, to get $500 reloaded cards and send them the numbers off that. So this is kind of the silliness of that. That is a very common thing among phishing and scams, where they will say, we are the Microsoft support, we are someone support, we are a number of different scams. They will always ask for gift cards, because it is as good as money. It is electronic money. It is nearly untraceable. It'd be kind of nice if there's something was done about that to where it could be traced in some fashion. The government might have a way of doing that. I don't know. But it tends to be, once that money is onto a gift card, and those gift card numbers are sent overseas, it's gone. You're never going to see that money. You're never going to get that money back. It's likely transferred 3 or 4 times by the end of the day, so it's been obfuscated to where its route is gone. You don't get that money back. Again, that's the most common indicator of a scam. Once you get through all of their steps and everything, they want to get paid. and they're going to say Wirecard, not Wirecard. I've confused wire transfer and card there. Gift card of some variety. So whenever you see a gift card pop up, you can immediately go, that's a scam. Because anything legit would probably take a check or a wire transfer, something of that nature. Something that is legally trackable, that has an audit log that backs it, and that can be taken back if something has gone wrong. And our last thing to look at here is our fake ID. Ooh. John Gilmore's probably not happy with how bad this ID looks. So, again, at a glance, if this thing were small, it probably wouldn't look too bad. But blown up on a screen here, it becomes very apparent how bad this thing is. I mean, obviously, your logo here looks very bad. Let's see if we can, let's zoom it out a bit. So, like, at this size, it's not obvious. And it's still not great. But we bring it up to a human readable size, you can again see logo is blurred and fuzzy. This weird off centering, I think it's called kerning. I'm a little fuzzy. I'm not a graphics artist person. Working on that, but this is not in the right place. This is again, it's like the feng shui or the layout of this thing. Companies are very particular about their branding. They want things to look professional. They want things to look sharp and sleek and that overwhelming sense of this is a corporation I'm dealing with, not some guy. So again, this card looks slapdash. That's a fun word for this. But you can look at, we're going to dive a little further here. You can look at the background where they just took this top left logo and they just overlaid it over and over again across the whole background, hoping to make it look like a watermark or something good. But you can see where they just, like, they were okay the first column, and it gets progressively worse to the third column. They do not care. Like, they copy paste, they're like, yeah, I'm done. They're not going to look this close. Well, we are. You can see where it's like, obviously, the logos are overlaying each other now. And poor John Gilmore, they actually did, like, they squished his face a little bit. So let's actually dive into the investigation. So we've seen how the advanced fee scam works, where it's just, you want money? Give us money. So the actual, let me jump a screens again. So we got Jeff Green. He's a legit person. We got a wiki article here. This guy really does exist. John Gilmore, he really does exist. I actually found him on LinkedIn. Again, LinkedIn does not necessarily mean that this guy is real. Anyone can make a LinkedIn profile. But this guy does have a lot of activity over years. So I didn't just go, hey, this guy has got a real profile. He must be legit. No. I did a bit of research on him. I dug into, I basically did some light stalking / investigation. Stalking / investigation depends on what side of the legal line you're on, I guess. Fortunately, I'm on the side of good for this one. Yeah. So I started digging into his profile, and there's enough activity spanning over many years for me to be somewhat certain this is actually him. It's actually a real person, not the scammers. So I actually did eventually reach out to John Gilmore and told him, hey, there are people that are pretending to be you, just so you're aware. If you're getting angry emails or angry whatevers or angry calls, here's what's going on. And he actually did say, yeah, I've been getting people contacting me, and I don't understand why they're contacting me. And I did a bit of investigation. It's like, this is a Hungarian, appears, scamming group, and they are using your credentials or using your, not like his password and username, but his face, his identity, to perpetrate their scam. So switching switching gears in investigation. So I mentioned that they're Hungarian or likely Hungarian. So most people question immediately, how do you know that? Well, good question. So a couple things. So the first thing kind of twigged me was in his email where I'm supposedly talking to Jeff Green. You actually see Jeff Green, a multi-billionaire, is emailed me from indamail.hu. That's Hungary. That .hu is Hungary. Which doesn't mean anything necessarily. It does mean that he's using an equivalent of the Hungarian equivalent of Gmail. I would assume that Jeff Green a multi-billionaire probably has a corporate domain that he owns, not using Hungarian Gmail. So that's kind of a tip off there. But also, if you go down here, and all the other emails, they actually sanitize this out. And this one they did not. So on top of the actual email account, this is your from to your date and your subject. So that is actually in the language of the computer they're using. So I actually didn't recognize the language offhand. I had to Google it. It is Hungarian. So that's where I kind of lean more into that, to where whatever computer this person used to type this is is displaying in a Hungarian, and very very likely that is your primary language. Like I would not use my computer in Spanish or in German or a secondary language. I would use it in English because that's my primary language. That'd be the easiest for me to converse in. So obviously, but they do speak English fairly well, and a lot of this probably is pre-written script. But all of the emails, I didn't see anything as obviously spelled wrong or syntactically wrong, or the punctuation or the verbiage was obviously wrong. So they actually do speak English fairly well, but that tipped me off there. So diving deeper into the investigation, I use a few tools. So I'm going to make this bigger here because we don't need those other screens now. I use a few tools to make my life easier. You can do this by hand, but laziness and efficiency are kind of the same thing all the time. So to make my life easier, I use a tool called Fish Tool. That will just help me go through these things and pick out information quickly for me. So looking at the Jeff Green email, we can see some information from this one. So you can see, in my case, I can see the email itself. It's like my plain text, my HTML, my source, stuff like that. But seeing the email really does not tell me much. We need to dive into the technical side of it. So we're looking at like our headers. So we can see obviously it came from Jeff Green at indamail.hu. Again, we know that that isn't Hungary because we can do a who's lookup on that. Actually, I didn't pull anything up on that. That's interesting. Did earlier. I guess I probably timed out on that. I don't know. Indamail is Hungarian. Sorry. We can see Vitmail. So this one is passing through this RDNS here. So let's do an IP lookup on that. Do I get anything now? Okay, yeah, there we go. You can see where it's passing through in Budapest. Budapest is in Hungary, the capital, I believe. Yeah. So received lines. So we can actually track the email through its conversation with the servers. So it originated from this server. So this is likely their internal servers talking to each other as it passes through their network to go out to the world. So it's our internal server to another internal server, from our internal server, the Indamail HU, to Google, out to our Gmail account. So at least we can again point more towards this came from Hungary. We can see some other information. Some of it's useful, some of it's not. In a real investigation, this would not be. I would not just be skimming over this stuff. I'd be spending a lot of time diving into it, an hour or two of really investigating each individual function or each individual section or technical detail or any trace of information. A lot of the time, the scammers or the phishers, the attackers, are good enough to get rid of the very basic information off these things. They will make sure they clean off like their EXIF or their metadata off of whatever forms they're using, but they forget something like a specific verbiage or a specific idiom that's only used in certain parts of the world, or specific IPs that this thing has transferred through, or different mail server technologies that are only available in certain sections of the world, or that are leaking information that they don't want us to have. And what I'll normally do is I'll take that stuff and I'll build a bigger picture. Now, like the figurative whiteboard of pictures with red string going everywhere, where I build a picture of what this group is, what they do, how they function, and I pass that off to usually law enforcement. if it's worth it. Most cases, we just block it outright. I notify their providers, their email providers, their ISPs, their web providers, their registrars, their domain providers, and just tell them all, hey, here's my research and my information, and this is what I found. This is the evidence I have for this. Can you shut these guys down? My success rate on that right now is actually upwards of 90%. Most companies are pretty good about once you give them a legit data dump of it's not even a data dump. I actually boil it down a good amount and show them this is what I did, and this is what I found. They'll take care of it. So what I'm looking for is any bit in here that will lead me to the next breadcrumb in their trail. So we'll jump over to the other email. So this actually is a bit more useful. So the original email came from a generic email address. This is actually they actually registered this domain, bplc-online.com, we can see here, with international payment. And it passed through a Latvian, sorry, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I can barely speak English, much less other languages. So a Latvian mail server. So this would, to me, indicate maybe a second party involved. Not necessarily, though. These countries are close enough, and they could just be going across lines to make it harder for someone from like me to do stuff with this information. It could just be that they happen to register this website at that domain, or it's like, hey, this is the cheapest domain registrar or cheapest web hoster we can find, and we don't care where it is. It could be that. It's kind of hard to tell. It would require more digging into. But this is where we actually get some more information out of this. So BPLC Online, we can go in here and do like a who is on this. So it is, let's see what we got. So unfortunately, they put theirs to a privacy corp. Those things are kind of the bane for me. They are useful because I definitely use them. I don't want people to have my information, or at least it make it easier for them to spam me. They're not gonna scam me, but for them to spam me, I can be scammed. I mean, anyone who says they can't be, they're not protecting themselves as well as they should be. You gotta stay paranoid. Anyone can be scammed if the scammers can find the right pain point to get at you. It can be done. No, in this case, anyway, they block this, so it's gonna make it harder for me. At least to dig into it. What I'll end up doing is I'll end up contacting this group and saying, "Hey, your service is being used for scams." And a lot of times they'll turn around and provide the information. If not to me, then to law enforcement. If it's worth law enforcement's time. So it's kind of the gotcha on that. We also look at, okay, what's actually at this? So use a secure browser here. Because obviously I'm not going to load these on my own computer. So like when you saw me opening the PDFs earlier, that was not my computer. I was logged into a remote computer that's a dirty computer. Dirty not being it's like covered in dirt. As far as I know, it's not. It's a computer that's intentionally set up for these sorts of investigations. So it's on an isolated network, totally separate from my systems, from my production network, and from anything that is actually sensitive. It's totally isolated from the rest of our systems, physically, virtually, digitally, whatever. And usually when we're done, we'll blow away that system. We'll just nuke it and rebuild it. So that's a dirty system. But anyway, what we've got is when we actually view this web page, this bplc-online.com, we get this. It doesn't look like much, but that actually is the website. This is a index. Well, obviously it's on the screen. It's just a list of files. There's no real web page there to do anything with. I think it's kind of unfortunate they didn't bother to put like a Barclays bank thing up there, but that would at least make it more visually interesting. But they didn't need to. They don't care. If I'm going as far into it, then they can assume that they probably got me. But I actually did dig into each of these on my own time there, off screen and all that. There's really nothing there. I'm trying to figure out exactly what those are. Each of those directories has a file in it of some variety. It's usually like more of this code sequence, and references Komodo, which Komodo, if I remember right, is an SSL certificate provider. So I'm not sure what's going on there, like why these files from 2016 are showing this stuff. I'll dig more into it just to see because I'm interested. But again, there's nothing there. And our requests, yeah, we got 200. So we didn't get anything really interesting. But what we can find is they're running an Apache server with cPanel, OpenSSL. There's very likely a Linux server this is running off of, running Apache 2.4.53 with cPanel. So this is likely with cPanel. If you're not familiar with cPanel, it is a control panel for multi-tenant servers. So with most time when you have a web server, it's not just your site on that web server. It's usually like thousands or tens of thousands of websites all share this one web server. Think of like an apartment building. So you can have an apartment building, one server, with many people or websites living on that server. So what cPanel does is a control panel that makes it easier for the tenants and for the administrators of the server to administrate that server, to make changes to like FTP accounts, to mail accounts, to web accounts, to generally to just do stuff for that server or for that website without having actual access to the server itself. It's a good way of handling multi-tenant stuff. Uh, Again, it's not really showing us much, but this is very likely. It means that this is a multi-tenant server. So I'll be reaching out to whoever runs this. Let's see. Actually, let's see if we can do a quick. Let's do a quick who is back on that. Can we see who the registrar is? I actually want to track it back to. So what I want to do is I actually want to track it back to their actual host, which is very likely is AlphaHost. So let's pull up what AlphaHost is here. Okay. I do not speak Hungarian or Latvian for that matter. But I can tell you from the look of it, this is. Wait. Thank you, Google. Okay. So this is a web hosting service. So my next step after this video would be to reach out to this company, AlphaHost LV, and say, hey, your service is being used to host scamming and phishing websites, and they will usually take it down. Yeah, at a glance, so even without this being in English, you can tell just by how it's structured. This is a sales site for this stuff. So for hosting of services. So we've got there. As far as our investigation goes, we know they have a domain. That's their domain. We know what server they're using to host their stuff on, so we can reach out to them. We know some basic names in there, not their names, but the names they're using as. We have a rough geographic region, very likely from both the IP addresses and by the contextual clues like the subject to and from we saw earlier. And let's keep going, see what else we can find. We got our received lines, so where we can see things hopped through. It hopped from the AlphaHost server. What I would like to do is, if I can, track that back to a private or like basically a public IP on the private side. Sometimes it does get exposed where it will show if they're not using webmail, if they're using something like Outlook to write these emails, it will also include the IP address that they're using to send from. So it'd be like their public IP address for their company for wherever they wrote this from. And that's not as helpful if they're writing from like their home because those IP addresses recycle periodically, and that's out of scope for me to deal with. But at least we can look at okay, they came from here, from this IP to Web02. Likely, let's do a quick who is. What is this? It's likely just AlphaHost, but let's make sure. Oh, that's right. I have to run it through RIPE because it's out of country. Can I get that information? Yes, no, maybe. Let me grab that IP again. So I want to know is can I track this back to a specific place? Is data camp a real place? That's probably just you know, I could probably get it, but it might be too much work for me to do right now. I don't want to bore you with me trying to dig around and find this thing. Because most likely this will be is probably an internal IP address, or not necessarily internal, but an IP address assigned to Alpha host being used by one of their servers. So it's probably a server connecting to another server and sending through the email server to another mail server, and eventually all through the mail servers down to our Gmail account. Is like Gmail is a webmail. Instead of using an email client like Outlook or Thunderbird or the like whatever your phone has, Mail or the Gmail client on there. If you're using webmail to log into it, it makes it harder for me to track it back because those are better because the email originates from that server rather than originating from like Outlook on someone's computer. It's rare to actually find information, but I kind of work on the rare things where I'm like, what little piece of information can I take from this and pull this out to make this and pull this out to make this? It's kind of drawing a picture with dots. The X headers can sometimes give us good information here. We got some Google sourcing, spam checker, so it passed through Spam Assassin. So that just means that this Alpha host service is using Spam Assassin. Kind of funny that their Spam Assassin own thing didn't catch it. Very likely because that was going outbound, so they didn't care what's being sent out. Whereas the inbound Spam Assassin is a mail filter, so inbound it does care, but like outbound they probably don't scan that much unless something like really obvious. Again, its authenticated server is a web host. At least it's named that way. So it very likely is a web server, probably web mail, and it's sent out through that. So it sent this. Security. That shows us things like SPF, DKIM, DMARCs. These are all technologies to prevent spoofing. In this case, they actually are not spoofing. They're using a fake name, like we see over here. Display name does not match the from name here. That doesn't actually mean anything because you can have whatever from address you want here. Hottie6969 at Gmail, but your name is probably not Hottie6969. Your name probably is John Miller. So it doesn't match up. It's just something though. It's an easy indicator of going, hey, that doesn't match. But because they actually sent these from their actual mail server, from the name they registered on that mail server, it will pass SPF, DKIM, DMARC. In this case, it doesn't pass DMARC because they probably don't have it turned on. That's not really unusual. DMARC is somewhat of a newer technology. So they're not spoofing anything. They're spoofing a person's name, but they're not spoofing someone else's server or email account. They're spoofing a name, display name. In this case, this one actually does have an attachment, so our Barclays transfer form. So what I look for with those is a little bit of information, each little data point I can kind of build. Again, also don't trust these files, obviously, because I did not open them on my computer. I opened them on my dirty computer to see what would happen, and I actually use another tool called hybrid analysis. We'll look at in a moment here. We're looking at, does it have any this one will have EXIF. Does it have any metadata that will be useful? Because sometimes they forget and they actually write their name in there because they register Adobe Acrobat, and when you create files using things like Word or Office utilities and Office tools in general, or Adobe, it will usually also append in the creator name. So like when was it created, who was it created by, the username, any weird little data in there. It's called metadata. There's data describing data. EXIF, what I mentioned earlier, is metadata specific to images usually. So when you take a picture with your cell phone or with a high-end camera, if people still have cameras these days, they have cell phones usually because they're just as good. But if they're using a physical camera, it will append information on there called EXIF. That'll be things like your aperture speed, your focus, your color gradients. And if the camera is good enough, it'll do stuff like GPS, which for people like me is extremely useful. If someone forgets they send like a picture and they forget to clear out their EXIF data, then I'm like, oh yeah, now I know where they are. Probably. you also have to check that stuff because it could be fake or it could be someone else's picture, but you never know. But getting off my tangent, looking at this particular form, I actually did look into it and there was nothing useful on it. It does run through VirusTotal. It did not flag anything. That does not mean it's not a dangerous file. It just means there's no known attacks or no known viruses or behavior in that file that look bad. Doesn't mean it's not. This means that we don't know about it. So I run this thing through like hybrid analysis here, where it will take the file and detonate it inside a virtual machine. So detonate means it actually opens the file and watches to see what happens. So it explodes it and looks for what comes off. Any weird parts, any weird behavior, any weird colors or something that would tell us what this thing is made of. Uh, it does things like virus scanning and VirusTotal and CrowdStrike and all that, just general virus scans. But it also does open the file to see how it behaves. So I'm using the free version, so it doesn't really show as much stuff as I'd like it to. For my needs, the free version does what I need to do. All the stuff I end up doing by hand anyway, using something like I think it's Magic Chef. Let's see, was it Cyber Chef? Sorry, Cyber Chef is a great tool if you're into like CTF hacking games. It's amazing, so keep that on your list. But again, we're just gonna look at this and say, okay, is there anything in here that looks useful? Any strings or anything? So it did found a pattern match, a string for this. It thinks it's an email address because it has that at this dot this. It's unfortunately not a real email address. It's just general data that just kind of clumped together to look like an email string. It would be nice if it was. It's not. But we can go through and see what this thing do. Does it access any files? Does it create anything? Does it drop any files? Does it try to open anything? Does it read anything? Again, it didn't really do anything particularly useful or anything that we would not expect. Really, it did drop a file. It dropped itself. It dropped the PDF file into a visited links, into where you expect for if Adobe Acrobat opens a file, it did this stuff, which is what we totally expect Adobe to do. So it didn't do anything like particularly, unfortunately, very interesting. A nice part of this is, actually, I scroll past it, is it does let me view these files. So when I do want to do investigation in this thing, I can, rather than opening this file on a computer and messing with it to see if it's actually worth my time, I can open it here and it'll show me a picture of like, this is what this looks like. It just saves me from having to spin up a machine or to do any real to do real analysis. I'm doing analysis right now, but from having to do anything to get the analysis, because I can very easily drop this thing in here and come back 10 minutes later and like, oh look, there's my stuff. Does it look like it's something useful to me or not? Maybe not. So we can see it. We can see it like it's what it did. So this file, watch transfer confirmation, was dropped onto this virtual machine. It's opened by Adobe Reader. It did some stuff. Nothing interesting. No DNS requests, no hosts, no HTTP traffic. Some various strings here. Let's see if we can get anything interesting. I didn't look too deep at this one. Any interesting strings here? So strings are any block or string of text that looks like it's not random data. It was looking for anything like int obj or round trip. So legit words or combinations of letters and numbers that actually could mean potentially something useful to us. So in this case, I'm not seeing anything. It looks like the general stuff you would expect from like Adobe just doing Adobe stuff. It would be nice if it said like, I'm the bad guy, my name is John. But no. So sometimes you'll look for, like you saw in one of the other videos I did, you can get lucky and you'll find things like passwords hard-coded into here, or financial information, or some part of the attacker's stream of their stream of work somewhere in there, so you can track it back through that. Fortunately, nothing in this case, so nothing a whole lot to show here. What's this runtime notification? No, okay, nothing interesting there as well. This actually all kind of boiled down to There we go. So what all is really boiled down to is a not very glamorous phishing attack. Uh, the advanced fee scam is at its core, you want much money, you give me a little money, and that's really all it is. This attack or this confidence scheme or this scam has probably been around for as long as humans could talk to each other, or even if we get signed to each other, or some way of telling each other this information of I have this, do you want this? That's unfortunately is a scam. As I said earlier, it's very unlikely that you're going to win $2 million if you didn't participate. If you didn't participate in the French lottery, you don't win the French lottery. It's very unlikely that some philanthropist billionaire is going to randomly pick your email address out of the probably trillions of email addresses there are in the world and say you won this, and then say US $1,000 to get that money. No, they'd just be like, you want $2 million, you want it. Here's your $2 million. Um, just as a rule. So unfortunately, this is not a glamorous one to look at. It is to be aware of, though. Most mail filters do block these sort of things. In my own case, this is one of my honeypot accounts to where it is not filtering things because I do want the bad guys to be able to reach it, and I want to be able to see this stuff so I can turn around and research it and analyze it and better educate other people on it, so that, like, they can see what these things look like and how to prevent these. Um, while the advanced fee scam is extremely basic and extremely common, is unfortunately still very common because it does work. Is very very low effort. There is no website here. There is no cool code. There is no technical wizardry going on. It's just an email saying if you want something, you need to pay me to get it. So the cost of doing this scam is incredibly low. The risk to the scammer is incredibly low. So even to send out 1 million of these and they get one hit back, they're still $2,000 ahead, or however many thousands of dollars they get. $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $50. Whatever they get is money they don't have now, and it costs them pennies on the dollar to do this. So I would like to show more glamorous, ritzy and cool and sparkly and technically visually interesting scams, but sometimes the very basic scam works. Sometimes it is simple as saying, "Hey, what's your password?" That surprisingly works a lot for me when I'm doing my research or I'm trying to do a blue security side or red teaming. I Sometimes the easiest way for me to get that information is simply to call someone and saying, "Hey, it's IT. What's your password?" So simple is a lot of times better. And while most people will be able to be able to identify that and go, "Hey, this is not legit. This is a problem," it works enough that it's still worth it to the scammer to do this sort of thing. Because again, the payoff is so much higher than the risk or the cost of doing business for them. So until that risk increases, until there is a real, uh, like a real legal risk to them, to not just like we got fined. Because if they make $20,000 and they get fined $1,000, that's not a fine; it's a cost of doing business. So we have to make it so that these people are found and they are prosecuted to where they don't make that money and they lose that money and they lose a bit more on top, or some way of making it so that that risk is high enough to outweigh that reward. In the good and bad of the world is now that the world is so interconnected, and in technology is advancing so quickly, and so many amazing things that we can do to communicate to make this massive amazing world so small now that we are able to communicate with each other instantaneously across thousands of miles. Uh, that is kind of amazing. The downside of that is that, well, not the downside, but the risk inherent in that is that we as societies, our laws and uh, not necessarily paranoia, but our ability to identify these threats has not caught up. So until the justice systems and our paranoia, I don't like to necessarily use the word paranoia as a bad context, but our natural suspicion, unfortunately, has to be there. And when that fails, our justice system has to have the ability to remove the reward and increase the risk. Otherwise, these sorts of scams will never go away. Technology is amazing in its ability to help us communicate and its ability to try to prevent us from these threats. But technology is only does what we teach it or tell it to do. It really cannot learn, even with like machine learning or AI that we have now, is not going to know, hey, that's a scam, that's a threat, that's a phishing attack, this is something, until someone tells it to, until enough information gathers up for it to learn this pattern looks like an attack. And what will happen then is the attackers will shift. They will either shift technologies, they'll shift vectors, they'll shift their approach, their process, so that we can no longer see, we can no longer fingerprint what they've done for a machine to prevent it. So it comes back to you probably the thing I will harp on every time, and that you will hear me say over and over and over again is the human element, the we as humanity. Not that's much more broad than it means to be. We as citizens of the internet need to take it upon ourselves to educate ourselves to identify these things, to be suspicious, a healthy level of suspicion of these sorts of attacks, these sorts of threats, to protect ourselves, to protect our businesses, to protect our livelihood, to protect our everything that our technology touches. Because the more we invest our lives in technology, the more that it is out there, outside our boundaries, outside of our walls, to where it can be reached, and it gives the bad guys leverage to touch other things, to get at other things. So if they can get at your email account, they can leverage that or hop off that as like a lateral attack onto other things that are somehow connected to that. No, just things to be aware of. I have run out my time a fair bit here, mostly because this is not a very pretty attack. It's not visually interesting, but it works, and it keeps working. So stay safe out there. Be suspicious, not too suspicious, just the right amount suspicious. And safe journeys, everyone.